All right, today we're catching up with Brent Forrester. From The Simpsons to The Office to Space Force, Brent has worked on some amazing projects. To frame this, I originally contacted him because he was the lead writer for the New Leads episode of The Office. Seriously, this is one of my favorite interviews I've conducted so far. So if you like this kind of stuff, hit the like button, let me know. With that, let's get into the interview.
Awesome. Okay, so we're here with Brent Forrester. Super cool. Your IMDb page reads as Chris's favorite things. Like I was looking through your list of Simpsons episodes that you have writing creds on, and like Lisa's saxophone. These episodes that kind of defined my childhood. So first of all, thank you. Great stuff.
Sure.
Like
Thanks,
vivid
man.
memories of just watching some of your content, throughout life. So what intrigues me a lot is like, how did you get into filmmaking? What interested you?
Yeah, I had this weird route because, in fact, my mom had this strong prejudice against TV. She thought that television rotted the brain, and so she would not allow television in our home. And as a result, I literally went through my entire youth, graduated high school, pretty much never watching television. I had books, that was my entertainment, and that made me a little bit better at creative writing exercises. And so in 8th grade, I entered a short story contest. It was the theme was brotherhood. It was put on by something called the National Council of Christians and Jews. It was just this wonderfully kind of ethical, supportive thing. I won $50 by writing a corny short story, and that clicked in my brain. I'll be a writer. You can make money writing. So that's what did it for me. I literally took only short story classes as my writing training in college, and then I graduated, and I had this terrifying revelation that I had studied an art form that nobody was consuming anymore because television had been invented, and that's actually when the study of comedy and comedy writing began. I really did not watch television until after college.
Wow. Okay. So when you first started watching television, what were kind of the big hits for you then?
Well, basically what I did was I was desperate to get a job, and I thought I have no connections except a friend of mine, his mom wrote for television, and she had created the Golden Girls. This was Susan Harris, one of the legendary self-taught comedy writers of her age, and truly like a self-taught kind of genius. And she told me I had to write spec scripts. So, spec script is just a writing sample. And so I went and tried to write a writing sample of the most popular show of the time, which was Murphy Brown. And but Murphy Brown was in season 7 or something, and the show had really trailed off in terms of quality. So I wrote a kind of faithful imitation of a bad Murphy Brown, and that was when I got my great first lesson in comedy writing, because Susan Harris read half of my bad Murphy Brown, and she said, "There's 3 things you need to know." She said, 1, silly isn't funny. And, I had been writing, zaniness, thinking that was comedy. And this is what made Susan great, was she recognized that, no, actually, that's not what people are consuming when adults consume comedy. She said, number 2, write the way people talk. So she was pushing me towards naturalistic dialogue as opposed to artificial dialogue. And then she said, write about what's difficult for you, even painful, and trust that it will come out funny. And that was the secret of her talent. She was able to write about what was difficult for her, even painful, and trust that it would come out funny. It's a method. It still works for me, and remains the greatest insight I ever got into the craft.
What was kind of your journey into The Office?
Well, it started, I managed to break into TV after writing a lot of specs. I had gotten on a show called The Ben Stiller Show, which got canceled, but we won the Emmy for writing. And so because I had an Emmy, I was 25, but I got into The Simpsons and was one of the second wave Simpsons writers. There was the original, legendary creators of that show. And then about half that staff went on to do other shows. So they had, half a staff to replace on a hit show. And that's when I came in around season 5. And, sitting next to me was a Harvard writer who was very talented named Greg Daniels. And Greg would go on to create King of the Hill. When he did, he hired me. And then later he created The Office and again hired me. So I had managed to impress Greg when I sat next to him on The Simpsons just enough that he hired me, for subsequent gigs. That's how I got on The Office.
That's cool. And then that's like going off IMDb, that's like persisted now. I saw like Space Force writing credits. And are you also a producer on Upload? Was that?
Yeah, I did a season on Upload as well. No, Greg, that's most of my career is Greg hiring me to work on his shows.
That's awesome. Well,
the other half, by the way, of my career is Judd Apatow hiring me to work on his show. So that's the totality of my IMDb page.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah. I saw you wrote one of my favorite episodes of Space Force season 1 with the war games, right? That was I loved it, that one. Okay, but we're not here to talk about those things. When I got in contact with you, I floated over my idea for kind of what the deeper meaning, right? That's one of the things that I do on the channel when I'm reviewing every episode. I try to find some of the, a little analysis, right, of what is there. And to your point, either on record or off record, New Leads is not like anybody's favorite episode. I don't think.
I think it's a bit of a failure, man. When I was watching it, it's hard to tell why. It has a lot of good conflict. It has stakes, etc. But I'll tell you one thing, man. The freaking CGI job of the garbage dump is so bad. And I have to say, I was the director, so it's all on me. But honestly, it was CGI was new, and what they showed us, they just bamboozled us, and it was a major crisis. Like, as I recall, the CGI company had to pay to have the episode unlocked and redone. So it was worse before whatever you're seeing now. It's comical.
That's crazy. So in my head narrative of how that episode probably came to be was that there was, it was written to go to the dump, but then, I guess maybe timelines probably got a little bit more crunched than what was originally expected.
Yeah, and Chris, the actors really did not want to go to a dump, and we visited a dump, and I was kind of like, oh, these white gloved actors can't handle the work. No, these actors are hardcore. They'll do anything, but they were right. Like, the dump was so gnarly. It just felt really unhealthy to be there. It smelled and was just so we thought, well, we can do this. We can do it on a soundstage, and we were just dazzled by the presentation that the CGI company put on. And I guess that was state of the art at the time, but it looks like what it is. It's a soundstage with some garbage and then like a background, and the two just have a distinct line. So terrible. Oh my God.
Yeah, I spent a little time in the last week, like, looking at the lighting sources. I think I would say lighting is what hit that probably the hardest, right? I think there's a discrepancy between the foreground and the background, but like, there's like a lighting source coming at them like this, and then there's also, if you look at the boxes and all the trash, there's like all these different lighting sources that. But in my analysis, it's funny because I write these things and I think like I'm not sure this was originally intended to be read like this at all, right? Okay. And I'm now on season 6. I've been doing this for a year and a half. I start like noticing different lead writers have different, styles, different things that they tend to focus on. Like, Kayleen tends to be, she kind of focused on like just creating really funny stuff and very experiential things. Like Greg Daniels, I don't know him, but Greg Daniels seemed to focus on kind of the, he loved these characters, and early on focused on the cringe, and that kind of evolved into these kind of big story things. Like Eisenberg and Stupnitsky, they were kind of very silly, but then also kind of like, wouldn't this be funny if this was backwards kind of thing? So I kind of noticed all these like little, like Mike Schur is all about these kind of cringy, but then redemption, things. So I went back and I was like, am I reading something that's not here with Brent's episode? with new leads, I kind of looked back at all of my analysis of your past episodes, and I hadn't even put it together yet. But you've got the merger, which I think in that field guide I said this is kind of like commentary on desegregation, which is like these two different opposing like sides that are being forced together by outside of their own control, even in ways that maybe doesn't make sense.
Cool. I like that. That. That's cool.
There was a whole lot of these kind of things, So one of the things I was tracking for you was that you kind of like to explore the nuance of, these kind of discrepancies between relationships of things, like you like to kind of expand and pick apart like how things can be really complex, And so business school was one that I really loved about the idea of education versus like book smart, street smart kind of thing. Where does Michael fall flat versus, how does he do so well actually? But then like new leads, I got to this and I was like, man, is this all just like commentary on capitalism and kind of a play on the Marxist, theory, right, of these two different classes. So question, is it?
Well, I think it's really interesting and astute. I think your read on all of those writers has a lot of truth to it. And, you may be reading things that the writer does not know about herself or himself. And, I noticed in your analysis of my writing that I did not consciously intend the themes that you are identifying, but they are themes that are part of my upbringing for sure. So the influences to me as a human being were the 1970s. That's when I was a kid. That made a lot of impression on me. It was anti-materialistic. It was definitely a culture of anti-authoritarianism. Also, I came from the surf culture, which was itself anti-materialistic and anti-corporate. So yeah, those lefty values are coming through a bit. The episode that I was most proud of at The Simpsons was Lemon of Troy, which was Springfield versus Shelbyville. So those kind of team versus team, culture versus culture is maybe echoed in the merger a little bit as well. The thing that I notice in new leads, the parts that I like, there seems to be an attempt to get some games going between the actors, like when Andy and Ellie Kemper are doing hot or colder. To me, I kind of enjoyed that. Like I could feel, the playfulness has returned to this episode. The thing that I was really struggling with is the first like 7-8 minutes. It feels ponderous to me. It feels like it's too intellectual, and I feel entirely to blame for this. I think that they gave me a writer director thing. That's when you're really supposed to shine. And in fact, I simultaneously was doing a pilot for Ron Howard, and I think I managed to kind of make both of them like half as good as they should have been. That's my read.
So one of the lines that I think has become iconic for the series is in this episode, though. It's tucked away when Michael's talking about how, I'm going to butcher the actual quote, but he says,
because the way this place used to work was make friends first, make sales second, make love third, in no particular order.
I love that line. And for me, that's one of these iconic Michaelisms where it's like deep. But in that office way, it's just silly, So you're handed an assignment of write this and then direct this. What's kind of the process that you even have to go through to do that?
Well, when you're a writer on a staff, you wait your turn to be handed an assignment to write an episode. Normally, you're part of the team. You're there to punch up. You're there to give notes. You're there to team off with somebody and write a whole new version of a scene. You're just a worker bee. But every once in a while, you get handed a script to do. If you're lucky, it might be twice a year. You may notice in season 6, we did 26 episodes, which is a lot of episodes. And I think what happened here was no showrunner can really adequately supervise that many episodes. You just have to farm out chunks of it. And I think they correctly understood I had done a number of good episodes, and maybe it was time to give me a written by, directed by episode. But I do remember struggling on this one. I remember it was very, very difficult to get decisions made in the stories, and so it was almost as if we couldn't get a proper rewrite. And like I say, I really notice it in the beginning. It just feels overly written, overly expositional. A major flaw in this episode is that if you say what two characters are in the A story, that's really what you want. You want two characters in a struggle that resolves. That's a story. And the A story is Dwight and Michael. But that's not apparent to me until almost the end of the episode. That's a failing of the writing for sure.
Well, yeah, I could see that. I mean, so let me ask this: what is maybe your shining achievement for The Office?
Well, the one that everybody points to is Business School, which is also known as Pam's Art Show and has the C story of the bat in it. It's kind of a perfect combo of A, B, and C story. The A and the B story dovetail in this lovely way in which the protagonist of the A story, Michael, and the protagonist of the B story, Pam, solve each other's emotional problems in a lovely way. It's also what Steve Carell talked about. Steve Carell liked small victories. That was a watch phrase for him. And this one exemplifies that. If you look at it, what does Michael get? He's humiliated when he went expecting to be celebrated. But he gets just this one person whose taste he trusts has painted the office in a way that we see as mediocre, but he sees as a sort of sacred tribute to what he believes, that the office is a sacred place. Pam gets even less. She is looking for validation that she has talent, and the guy who's telling her she's great, she doesn't even respect his taste. I argued with Greg Daniels, the showrunner, about that ending. I said, this isn't a win for her. She's not getting what she needs. And Greg said, yeah, but it's kind of like if you had a bad day and the dog curls up with you on the couch. It doesn't solve your problems, but it's an emotional balm. And he was totally right about that. So the tone of victory there is so wonderfully small. And that episode is always celebrated as my best one. Probably my crowning achievement on that show.
Directed by J.J. Abrams too, right?
That one was
Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon, yeah.
Joss Whedon, yeah.
He did a really good job. He contributed so much to that episode, including for me a kind of iconic visual moment in the Bat story when Jim says goodnight to Dwight, and he's gaslighting him into thinking that he's a vampire, and he says goodnight, Dwight, and he walks out like that and turns his coat, and it becomes this kind of cape-like image across his face, a perfect Dracula image. Not in the script. That was just Joss, the Buffy the Vampire guy, throwing in a great visual signature.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I love to hear it. So I have one quick question that I've seen. I did you also wrote the episode, Did I Stutter? And so any thoughts on this? I did get a lot of commentary on Stanley's frustrations may have been based on Michael's abundance of racially charged statements. So, but in the episode, I'm not sure it reads that way. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that was a great episode. The actors just so delivered on that one. That's where you get lucky as a writer. There had never been an episode that really pitted Michael versus Stanley. And I felt very lucky to get to do that episode. Really, it's a classic status struggle. Michael, as the boss, has power and status over everybody, and he's used to abusing it. And he just doesn't know how to handle it when a guy just goes, you know what? I challenge you publicly, and I will not apologize. And so it was such a wonderful, perfect, small, real, relatable obstacle. That's really what is driving it. but for sure, Michael Scott is a racially, culturally insensitive character. That's why we enjoy laughing at him, and we do laugh at him. The character is what we call an anti-hero. And it's an interesting term that I learned late in this career. An anti-hero is not an antagonist. You have a protagonist who's the main character. If that protagonist does not embody all of the values that we look for in a protagonist, is not a hero, then we can have an anti-hero. And that really is what Michael Scott is, because he's always the A story in whatever he's in. He's the main character you're following, but he's not one that you admire. And part of why we don't admire him is his obvious buffoonish cultural sensibilities. And I think, it does play into that episode, but doesn't dominate it by any means. There's a mutual humanity there that's quite encouraging, I think.
Yeah, no, I love it. And then you're going real far back here, so I understand if you don't, and I'll put you on the spot. Did I Stutter? Was that always going to be Stanley's, kind of crossing the line moment, or was there an argument over what may be a good line for him to yell at Michael?
It was always, did I stutter? I mean, the story was called that from the beginning. We just understood that was what he was going to say. And it was understood that would just freeze Michael completely. You may notice that most of the titles of the Office episodes refer to whatever day that was, Pretzel Day or Blood Drive. But this one, it was unique in that the title referred to a phrase of dialogue uttered in the episode. And that is how central that was to the episode, I think. So, and that phrase does have a kind of a cultural feel to it, doesn't it? It seems to trigger a kind of, cultural issue that Michael may be reacting to.
Yeah, it's definitely in like 3 words. You don't have authority here.
That's right. That's right.
It's so simple. It's really good. So what advice do you give to anyone who's, wanting to learn how to comedy write? What's kind of your go-to?
I mean, I teach a full class now, and it's because there's so many things that I picked up along the way. And I'm at that point in my career where the most satisfaction I get actually is sharing secrets of the craft. That one that I shared with you, Susan Harris saying, write about what's difficult to you, even painful, trust it will come out funny, is the best piece of advice I have. The other one, I think, I am self-taught. I did not even watch TV until after college. I learned to write TV by watching it. I did not have a gift for comedy writing. No question. I am not talented by nature. But what that means is I have proven that you can teach yourself. You can learn to do it. The way I did it was watching stuff that worked and then dissecting it and trying to figure out why did it work. When I got hired as a writer on The Simpsons, I went and watched 100 episodes of The Simpsons. And every time I laughed at a joke, I wrote down the joke. I transcribed it. And that was how I learned to become a Simpsons writer, was looking at those jokes and saying, why did they work? And you could do the same with, anything that works for you. If a scene works, if a sketch works, if a story works, ask yourself why. You will always find there are concrete answers. And I have 8 million of them. I mean, do you want some concrete ideas on how to make a story work? Please ask away. I've got 1 million.
Awesome. So you teach a class, is this like an online thing, or how did?
Yeah. Go to BrentForrester.com. I teach a class a couple times a year when I have free time, and usually it amounts to about twice a year. I'm doing one January 9th where I've had this desire to go deep into the fundamentals of comedy, and I'm teaching a class called Fundamentals of Comedy from Character to Scene and Story. The idea is that the basic element of comedy in the half-hour form is the comic character. And there is a definition of a comic character that I want to share. And then I want to show how you design a scene to trigger the comic traits of that character. Then when you have comic scenes, you use those as the building blocks of story. So that's kind of the fundamental insight that I've had after doing it for 27 seasons and what I'm determined to teach. But you can go at learning to write comedy mostly by imitation. I think watch stuff that makes you laugh and imitate that. Ask why. Be a scientist and pick it apart. That's my big advice.
I like it. Okay, and then so one last question. The Office was huge when it was on, right? But it's gotten maybe even bigger. I think
Yeah, for sure.
definitely even bigger since it's been off the air. Why
Yes.
do you think that it resonated so well then, and why do you think it resonates so well now?
Well, I think Netflix was a huge part of it. It was one of those shows where people found it on Netflix and massively expanded it. But that had happened to some other shows like Friends that happened to, and I thought Friends was basically a well-written show. And it does have a comfort food element. As stuff gets edgier and edgier, sometimes you want to go back to a network sensibility where you feel safe. And literally you feel like, as a parent, you go, if my 9-year-old daughter walks in, this will be fine. There's a certain kind of comfort food to network comedy. But like the good network comedies, it's very smart writers involved in the writer's room, and tremendous performers. So there is a just quality level of that show. It is good more often than most shows. And why is it super good? Why does it stand out above other shows? It's basically that naturalistic tone. So the taste-making comedy writers and performers that I have worked with, they love naturalism above all. And what does that mean? What it sounds like, on one side you have artificiality, and that can be funny, heightened reality, animation, cartoon, sketch, crazy stuff. That can be really funny and high energy for short periods of time, especially. For the half hour, for some reason, the people who are doing the acting, they're real actors, and they don't know how to act zany. They know how to act real. And so what they want is comedy that allows them to at any moment be in a profound drama. And that is naturalism. That's what we call that tone. The Office, better than any show in the history of TV, accomplished that tone when it was in its tone. The mockumentary, the fake documentary, helps that, because the documentary is the genre of realism, gritty realism. So the fact that we're in a mockumentary always pushes us towards that tone. And, it's not for nothing that if you like something that is tasteful, it reflects well on you. So I think young people, like the 13 and 14-year-olds who all fell for it, I think a lot of what they were getting out of it was like, it reflects well on me that I like The Office. Billie Eilish, tastemaker, not for nothing. She liked The Office because of its tone and its taste.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Okay, so I have a dictionary's worth of questions. We could literally sit here all day. I've got
do it. Hit me with 10 more minutes of hot questions.
All right, 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. IMDb. It says uncredited writing credits for Iron Giant.
Oh,
Story
yeah.
behind that?
Oh, yeah, man. I'm so proud of that. So that's Brad Bird's masterpiece. Brad Bird is a genius. He was the animator director behind Iron Giant and The Incredibles. The Incredibles is kind of about Brad Bird and how he knew he was a genius and had to pretend like he was normal his whole life. And Iron Giant is really one of his masterpieces, but I was very lucky. He brought me in to do a draft of that script, and it was the draft that got it greenlit. So it wasn't the final pass, nor was it the first pass, but I love the work that I got to do on that and participating in that wonderful, amazing animated masterpiece.
That's so good. I don't know what had happened. My son was really young, and I was like a little older so the time just didn't work out for me to even notice that movie. But he got it for Christmas or something one day, and I walked into his room and he's watching it, and I just did that dad thing where I just stood in the middle of the room and I just watched the TV for 10 minutes, and what are you watching? And he was like, Iron Giant. I was hooked. I've watched it. I think we watch it once a year now. It's
how cool.
It's like a staple in the Mulverine house.
Oh, that's cool. How about the wonderful genius thing that Brad did, where he recognized that having a time signature, doing it in this Cold War era and pulling from beatniks. He just knew that there was going to be visual material to be pulled from that. So that's just, again, part of his genius.
Yeah, I loved it. And, introduced us to Vin Diesel's voice acting. So that's great. We'll see how this one lands. I've never talked to anyone who's received a Razzie before.
Yes.
So I had never heard of the film that you had lead writing credits for, The Stupids.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's maybe one of those Mandela effect things, because I'm like, I watched the trailer for it last night and I was like, this feels vaguely like I've seen this trailer before, but it's like right up my alley of things I would have watched in '95, but I've never seen this movie. So what's up with
story?
The Stupids?
What's the story? Well, this was directed by John Landis, and John Landis was in a real crisis. He was being sued for the death of Vic Morrow, the actor who he loved, and 2 children on the set of The Twilight Zone. And I can tell you, in my experience with Landis, man, he seemed like a wonderful man who was in the most awful period of life a person could be in. And The Stupids was part of it. It was a defensive movie. He just felt like, I'm never going to be allowed to work again, and I have a contract in place and it's pay or play. So I just got to make this thing. And my agent put your name forward as a Simpsons writer. So write a script for me now. And I remember I wrote 50 pages of this thing, and I gave it to him. And he goes, "Great, we're doing it. We're greenlighting it." And I didn't even know what happened on page 51. I mean, it was literally, I had written, "There's a knock at the door," and ... I didn't even know who's at the door. Okay, so it was that slapdash. And then in the casting, initially they wanted. I wanted Michael Richards, as I recall, pre Meltdown. And they wouldn't approve that. And then Tom Arnold had just been in this movie, True Lies, as like the second banana. And so they said, oh, he's on a roll. They put him in. So, there was a lot there going wrong. But there's a sweetness and innocence to this movie. I mean, the thing was based on like an 8-page children's book. There was nothing to work with. And the characters are non-existent. There is some kind of like, children's book level joke play in there that's funny. In fact, there's one joke that I'm still proud of where Mrs. Stupid, I think, is walking down the street and she goes, note to self, get paper towels at the store. Also get milk. Oh, and get a tape recorder. You're talking into a pen. That's a funny joke. So that's the story of The Stupids. It's bizarre that it ever got made. I remember actually though going to a screening of it, and kids did like it. Like if you're under a certain age, it's an enjoyable film.
Well, I was watching the trailer last night, and I thought, like I said, I think this is up 11-year-old Chris's alley. There's not that many degrees of separation between that and something like Ace Ventura. I'm saying with almost no critical thought getting put into it, just surface level. I mean, it's like a blend of that Ace Ventura type of comedy that was going on, plus like Naked Gun, it seemed almost. So I was like, it's interesting. So any commentary on, how The Office kind of its evolution through the 9 seasons? Like what's kind of your take on, it gets a lot of criticism for the last few seasons, last 2 specifically. So what's kind of your thoughts on just the overall kind of evolution of the show?
Well, it was created by a core group of writers and performers under the leadership of Greg Daniels. And I was not part of that creation. I came in season 3. And over time, new writers were brought in, but the sense of the originals was always there. And I do feel like they deserve the lion's share of the credit for, creating what The Office is. Great writers were brought in, after season 5 in particular, and learned to write the show for sure. We knew that there was going to be a massive critical price to pay if we kept the show going on after Steve Carell left. So he left after season 7, and we knew for sure that eternally we were going to be criticized for doing a season 8 and 9. And Greg Daniels said, he predicted, he said, look, this happened to Saturday Night Live. It was praised by everyone. And then there has to be a narrative that the show has lost its way. And then he said, if you stick around long enough, then there'll be a new narrative, which is the show is back. And he said, our goal is to ride out the show has lost its way period until we get to the show is back. And he would have gone on. Greg would have gone on to do a season 10. In season 9, if you watch it, we're adding new cast members, the young guys, Jake Lacey and Clark. These young guys were brought in to be the new, Jim and Dwight, literally, and we were going to keep some of the old and then move on, So Greg had a whole plan to continue going, but it was really hard when you get rid of Michael Scott. You've lost one of the greatest comic performers of his generation. And I don't know if you watched, we did this whole dance of replacing him. Did you follow that whole thing? Where we brought in like Jim Carrey and Ray Romano and a whole bunch of actors that we teased as the possible new Michael Scott. Ed Helms had just had The Hangover come out, and so he just jumped to movie star. And so my understanding is there was sort of a network pressure to put your movie star in as the new lead. There was a huge amount of support for making Dwight be the new Michael when Steve left. I think that was kind of the hometown rooting section was for that. But it went the way it did. And in some ways, we found as writers that Ed's character, because he was this get-along guy, he didn't cause chaos in the office as the boss the way Michael did. So there was a challenge there for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember watching as it was, rolling out and just thinking, there have been times I have envied these people creating the show. I want to be there. I want to be a part of that process. I want to be a fly on the wall at least. After Carell's departure, I vividly remember thinking, they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. There's this feels, and I love hearing that about Greg Daniels because it gives me the point of view of let's get through it even if we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
It does take you have the writing credits for AARM, which in my mind is like one of the best episodes of the series. In my opinion, it's at least one of my favorites. And it does, I think, where the finale does a very good job of kind of like pushing these characters and the narrative into, our imaginative, imaginary future. Like AARM, I think, does a really good job of kind of wrapping up the whole story.
Oh,
so,
thanks.
What was writing that one like? I know it's
so
like
fun.
A collaborative effort, but like,
sure. Yeah, but it was fun. So season 9, I shared show running duties with Greg, that episode was, we really were divvying up the the show there, but I did get to write, the second to last episode. It was a supersized episode, and so that alone, we got to do more than normal. Yeah, I really enjoyed that episode. That was really fun. It was a good premise for Jim and Dwight to go out on. And it was nicely balanced with the other B and C stories, as I recall. There was even a D story in that one that came out freaking amazing, between Toby and Kate, the wonderful English actress whose character name I'm forgetting now.
Nellie.
What's that?
Nellie,
yes. Nellie and Toby had a D story in that one. Yeah, so it's interesting because, so I wrote AARM, and that's a very plotty episode. It really has story driving it. The one that follows is the actual finale. And that finale was written by Greg. and is really just emotionally driven more than story driven. To me, it almost becomes like this yearbook that Greg has made, where he put in the episode all these members of the crew and his own manager. His wife is in it. I have a moment in there. He's putting writers in. It was as if Greg was trying to collect all the people that he loved in the making of The Office and put it in this final episode for himself. And plot-wise, in some ways, the episode before is the wrap-up of the story of the show.
Yeah, I love it. And it's funny. It's something I noticed around Stress Relief season 5, where it feels as though Stress Relief kind of changed the fabric of the show in a sense, if not the fabric of the show, at least kind of audience expectation somewhat. Because if you go and look at IMDb, because I'm a data guy, so I've pulled charts now of IMDb ratings. The peaks are all on those story-driven, emotional, plot heavy episodes, whereas what I would call filler, not in a negative way, especially not in The Office's case, because this episode like New Leads, to your point, it's no one's favorite, but it's so good. I mean, it's even the filler episodes here are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, for me, that's, how many people have told me over the last year and a half, I just keep The Office on as background noise. And so I can look up from doing whatever it is I'm doing. And it's Michael and Dwight having a trash fight at the dump. And it's just funny. I don't need to know everything else. I don't need to follow it. But those highlights tend to be those episodes that are the real story driven ones, which, I'm not sure was in the original fabric of the show,
Wow. That's a great insight. Really, really great insight. You're so right. And I know what you mean. There are times when the arc of the show seems to kind of pivot fundamentally, and those are the most memorable ones. I remember Mindy saying she felt that about the romantic subplot in the first few episodes, the Jim and Pam of it. She felt that there was this deliberate slow moves and then a series of quick moves. And the quick moves are the ones that we remember. The one where somebody kisses somebody or quits the job or whatever it is. It's well observed.
Okay, sorry. I keep saying I have one more question. So in the New Leads episode, I think I've already written this. I haven't filmed it yet, so I may come back depending on what you say here. Were we supposed to view Aaron and Andy as this new Jim and Pam, will they, won't they? Or are they kind of, because I feel like every step of their relationship is kind of bizarro Jim and Pam. Of they have nothing but missteps. Their first kiss is in the dump. Their first date, they're sick, and her creepy relationship with their foster brother. So there's and then the 12 Days of Christmas, bit, all amazing little nuggets of comedy in there. But I was, when I'm going through the season now, I'm this is the will they, won't they that no one asked for.
Yeah, you're so right. Okay, so what happened there, Chris, was we tried to create them as this love story, and we kept writing stories in that direction. But something just happens. There is a feeling that the actors will have that their characters either have chemistry or don't. And at some level, when push came to shove in the final season, we found, no, this is not what the actors are rooting for in their characters. And in fact, Aaron was meant to be with a guy much more like Jake Lacey, who is fucking handsome, dumb, but kind of, has a physical charisma, though he's a kind of a dope, That was much more organic for Erin in terms of, what her character was going to fall for.
Yeah, no, I love it. Okay, like I said, I can keep talking your ear off. I will let you go. I really appreciate your time. And for anyone who's watching this, we'll put the link to Brent's class for writers, comedy writing in the description. So, I really appreciate your time.
Chris, it was so fun. Let's do it again. You have my email, so reach out and we'll do another Q&A.
Awesome.
Guys, thank you so much for watching this. Thank you, Brent, for doing this interview. Seems like the channel has a new friend, which is awesome. Since this interview had occurred, I've lined up Brent to be a guest for one of the live streams coming up. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't. We'll see you next time.